Or news cycle we're in, you can bet your bottom dollar on that headline always being current. Case in point, Portland, Oregon. Lila Rose, the president and founder of award-winning pro-life organization Live Action, posted these images to social media. They show the violent aftermath of a hate-filled frenzy of suspected Antifa thugs who are putting hits out on crisis pregnancy centers. In this specific example, you can see the words FCPCs spray painted on the carnage, which stands for F Crisis Pregnancy Centers. Now think about that for a moment. Who could be mad at a crisis pregnancy center? They offer resources for pregnant women to explore adoption, as well as to receive diapers, formula, ultrasounds, or anything else they need to care for their child should they not go down the adoption route. And therein lies the problem for pro-aborts. These centers show for all the world to see the outright fallacy of arguing that pro-lifers don't care about babies once they're born, or that it's impossible for a woman to care for a child that she's not financially ready for. Pro-life centers have always stood ready to help women to obtain the resources they need. What this shows instead is the rage of pro-aborts called out on their lies. It's like a mirror that's been held up to their political sleight of hand, exposing them, in which it's revealed that their pro-abortion stance is actually much, much uglier than what they try and pass off to the public. What they really mean by their pro-abort arguments, but which they can't exactly vocalize, is that they don't want the kid, point blank. Arguments about rape or finances are just the sympathetic sounding arguments they use to obscure their cruel desire for expediency. They don't want to raise a kid for 18 years, whether or not they get the help to do so. And they also don't want to give up their kid for adoption. Almost like when some crazy person shoots their lover out of some bizarre notion that if I can't have you, no one else can. That's deeply and fundamentally opposed to what we know to be true, that all children are a gift from God, and that parents are called to sacrifice for their children, not to sacrifice their children for some worldly attainment. So over in Boulder, Colorado, suspected anarchists also took to vandalizing Catholic churches, specifically desecrating the image of our Blessed Mother and our Savior. The point isn't lost on me. Or what about the slogan, "My body, my choice," that's also being painted on the doors to the church? Well, Dr. Peter Kraft, a professor of philosophy at Boston College, has explained this phenomenon before by pointing out, quote, "Abortion is the Antichrist demonic parody of the Eucharist. That's why it uses the same holy words, 'This is my body,' with the blasphemously opposite meaning," end quote. Joining me now to discuss is Father Frank Pavone, the Director of Priests for Life. Thanks for being here tonight, Father.
Great to be with you again, Kara.
Thank you for being here. So are you surprised at all by these attacks that we're seeing growing on our churches and crisis pregnancy centers in the wake of the leak about the draft opinion from the Supreme Court?
Well, no, not at all. And you have to understand, our viewers need to know what's happening here is that we have lived through 50 years in which abortion has been taken out of the democratic and legislative process. That's a bad thing. That's always a bad thing. We are dealing with a dogma that somehow abortion is a constitutional right. This is what Roe v. Wade set into place. And when it's taken out of the hands of the people feel like, okay, whatever's going to happen with abortion is going to be a policy that's imposed on us. And now what the Supreme Court seems ready to say to us is, we're not going to impose any policy on you, whether pro-abortion or pro-life. We're going to put this issue back where it belongs, in your hands, because in this country we govern ourselves. The people govern themselves through their elected representatives. And when that happens, we win. That's when both sides need to, and we on the pro-life side have been doing this all along, we learn to work with our legislators to make our case, to persuade the public, to persuade those we have elected. The other side doesn't know how to do that, number one, because they don't have any persuasive arguments for killing babies. And number two, they've always been able to hide behind the robes of the judges to say that this is somehow okay. Once those judges say, hey, it's not in our hands anymore, they're going to have to make their case to the people that it's okay to kill these babies, and they are not going to get very far with that.
And that's the interesting thing. It leads into what I want to ask you about as well. We see the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. He was announcing today that it's a for sure that next week they will be voting to codify Roe v. Wade at the federal level. Of course, he knows they don't have the 60 votes in order to do so, and their attempts to get rid of the filibuster did not work out in the way that they wanted it to. So they know that the vote is going nowhere. However, they want Republicans on record voting against codifying Roe at the federal level. And I think that's very strange that Democrats seem to think that this is very popular, that the pro-abortion stance, that's very popular. And it's almost like they think that's their, and I hate to use the phrase, almost their Hail Mary pass leading up into midterms. But as you were saying, do you think it actually might blow back on Democrats in their face?
You know, it's been blowing back on them for a long time, but they haven't noticed. Abortion is a winning issue in elections. We have all kinds of polling that shows a significant portion of the electorate feel that the candidate they vote for has to agree with their position on abortion. And that's reasonable because it's the most fundamental question. Whom are we going to protect? Whom are we going to recognize as persons? And among those for whom abortion is a deciding issue in their vote in elections, people tend to vote pro-life 2-1. So it's a winning issue for elections. Now, they don't have to, the Republicans are all too happy to go on record supporting what has been in our country the fundamental stance, which is that we protect our children. This is one of the fallacies of Roe, and this is one of the reasons why the court is about to reverse it, because it's nowhere, not only is it not in the Constitution that there's a right to abortion, it's not in our history either. Nowhere, and Justice Alito in that draft opinion says this very clearly, absolutely nowhere in the history of our country's laws or court decisions has there ever been a so-called right to abortion asserted up until the time of Roe v. Wade. So where is this coming from? It's coming out of thin air. And the public has never, Kara, you know this, our viewers need to know this, the public has never, ever once in any single survey or opinion poll or analysis supported the idea of what Roe v. Wade imposed on this country, namely abortion throughout pregnancy. We've never gone along with that. We never will. But that's what the Democrats are trying to vote into law.
And speaking of the messaging, we also saw prominent Democrats, but you can also see these signs in these, protests that pop up. But I think it was most encapsulated by what we saw from the Democrat governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who took to his own podium to decry what the Supreme Court was doing, to say that, if men could get pregnant, and then he goes on to make his, lame argument, the type we've always heard before, it'd be a quote unquote sacrament, it'd be protected if men could get pregnant. I thought that was funny. Have you noticed how Democrats are now backpedaling? It used to be birthing people, all these strange terms instead of breastfeeding, chest feeding. We could go down the list, but the moment they think Roe might be out the window, they went away from this is affecting birthing persons to men and women. Also, they remember what men and women are. And funny enough, if men could get pregnant, they've been telling us now for months and years at this point that men can indeed get pregnant. What do you make of this weird messaging game that we're seeing?
They are disconnected from reality. We are in an age where people can't straight out say a man is a man or a woman is a woman. And you know why, Kara? Because for 5 decades, our nation has been trying to say a baby is not a baby. That's where the divorce from reality started. And now it only is blossoming more and more along its own track. And I was out in California recently speaking to a number of pro-life groups, and they were telling me, oh, Newsom is saying California is going to become a sanctuary state for the right to abortion. And you know what I said to them? And I say to everybody listening to us now, whether your state is going to be a sanctuary for abortion or a sanctuary for the unborn is not up to Gavin Newsom or to your governor or to any one person. It is up to you. And that's the beautiful thing about the moment. This really, Kara, you talk about tipping point. This is the tipping point now on the abortion issue. Because what the court seems to be about to do is to take that barrier away from the legislators and the people to protecting the unborn. And then our work begins. And then we work to protect them, and we work to serve those moms, to help those dads, to help those families to do what they already know is right. And that is going to be the pushback against this absolute insanity. The bottom line of the examples that you were just quoting is that you cannot defend abortion without absolutely distorting and disconnecting from any kind of reality, truth, or common sense.
And also, it's almost similar to the heartbeat law that we saw passed in Texas, where naming it the heartbeat law, I think, got a lot of people thinking, wait a second, a heartbeat? What do you mean a heartbeat? And so I really like the name of that legislation because I think it got a lot of people who maybe don't give this, this topic any thought at any great length. I think it gets a lot of them thinking that they can't just think clump of cells because, well, there's a beating heart at stake, a beating heart that's being stopped. So I think similar to the conversation with Roe now, you see it all over the nation. And it's funny, again, you read the signs and one of them is saying, a lot of them come from feminist women saying, well, we won't sleep with you unless you allow us to have our abortions. But do you think actually that this might work in our favor because it might help to undo a lot of the damage that we've seen in this nation for the past 50 plus years where we have had legalized abortion and you've seen all the ills that have come from the sexual revolution of the 60s. And maybe this might spark that conversation to say, wait a second, how should men and women be relating to each other?
There has been so much damage, and a big part of the argument that's been brought to the Supreme Court in this current case precisely tracks that damage. That was what our brief to the Supreme Court on behalf of Priests for Life was from our men and women of the Silent No More campaign and Rachel's Vineyard. These are ministries we run to heal those wounds of abortion. Families broken apart, people afflicted with temptations to suicide and substance abuse and longing for the child that they killed, not able to have any more children because the abortion ruined their fertility. We can go on and on all night with the damage that abortion does. And this is a reckoning moment. And Kara, the thing is that the courts have ignored this damage. They in some ways, even the Supreme Court has acknowledged that it's there, but they've ignored it in the sense of not allowing it to bring them to allow laws that will actually prevent abortion. But now, once again, they take away that invented dogma that there's a right to an abortion in the Constitution. Now the courts and now the legislators are going to be able to take more account of this damage that has happened and have it make an actual difference in the shaping of the laws.
And I'm so excited for this. I mean, after Roe was first passed, abortions actually went up. They said, actually, no, don't worry. Passing Roe, legalizing Roe will actually have abortions go down, and the exact opposite happened. So hopefully, if we can overturn Roe, then we're going to see a similar trend line in the fact that abortions may actually go down, despite all the hysterics that we're hearing that abortion will go up, it's going to go underground or to the alleys, that no, in fact, we're actually going to see it go down. And so that's what we're all praying for, a culture of life to be restored to this land. Father, thank you so much for joining us tonight.